This is lesson 9.2, completing the square and changing to vertex form. Our essential learning standard for today is I can complete the square to find the vertex form. So last time we looked at perfect square binomials and we would be able to take a trinomial like this and figure out what the final number would be, what the third term would be for a perfect square. If you remember doing this last time, if you don't, you can go watch the video from 9.1. So what we had noticed last time is that the middle term, like this 4x, happens to be double the value of the binomial value right here. So if you had the binomial, this would be x plus 2 squared. It's half of that 4. And then to find the last term, you square the number here inside the binomial. So x squared plus 2 times 2 plus 2 squared. In this case, 2 squared happens to be 2 times 2, right? All right, so our next one, x squared minus 6x plus c. If there's a minus in your problem, you need a minus in your binomial. So divide 6 in half. And then when we square it, so negative 3 squared is positive 9. Remember, every negative, if you square it, becomes positive. Kids get this wrong all the time because you'll type negative 3 squared in your calculator and it will give you negative 9, and that's because the calculator doesn't know that the negative is part of the square. The whole negative 3 is being squared, and therefore it's going to be a positive 9. Last one, if we divide the 5 in half, we'll get 5 halves. And when we square that, to square a fraction, you just square the top and then square the bottom, okay? So that's a little review of what we did last time because you're going to need to do this again for what we're learning today. Okay, so today, completing the square to find vertex form. So we have this equation here. It's in standard form, v squared plus 10v minus 18. And we want to complete the square to find vertex form. I showed you guys this once before, and we're going to do it more practice on it now. Okay, so what you're going to do is kind of make a space. So write the first term, 2 terms, and then make a space here on either side of the last term. So if you kind of ignore the minus 18 for now and just look at the 2 terms, we want to find the third term that makes this a perfect square. So 10 divided by 2 is 5, and if you square 5, that's 25. Okay, so what we've just made here is we've made a perfect square, v plus 5 squared. Okay, but you can't just like add stuff to an equation. That doesn't work. You have to either do it to both sides, or the trick we're going to use is, since we added 25, I'm now going to also subtract 25, because what is 25 minus 25 is 0. Essentially, I've just added 0 to this equation, so I haven't changed it at all. I'm just kind of manipulating it, right? So now I need to know what is negative 18 minus 25, right? So negative 18 minus 25 is going to be negative 43. Okay, and now you see that we have this equation in vertex form instead of standard form. So from the first lesson again, we learned that this is vertex form, and the vertex of this would be at negative 5, negative 43. So vertex form is really nice because it helps you graph. If you have the equation in standard form, it's not very nice for graphing. So now we have vertex form, and you can see it would be positive, and you'd have a vertex down here at negative 5, negative 43. It makes it easier to graph. That's why we like vertex form. Okay, so let's try another one. Okay, so again, what we're going to do is make a space right there after the first 2 terms. We're going to look at the first 2 terms only and say, okay, it's x squared minus, so I need a minus, and we're going to divide that in half. 13 halves. That's a terrible 2, sorry. And then, if we squared 13 halves, what are we going to add and subtract to this equation? So remember, squaring a fraction is always positive, right? 13 squared is 169, 2 squared is 4, and we're also going to subtract off 169 over 4. Okay, so all this is that, and now I need to figure out what 12 minus 169 over 4 is. So I'm going to type that in my calculator, right? You can use your Desmos scientific calculator and type 12 minus 169 over 4, and then you can even tap the little fraction button to get your fraction. And there's our equation. You could also do this in decimals, and that would be absolutely fine. So you could do y equals x minus and put your 13 halves as a decimal as 6.5. Okay? So I will accept either answer, and then you could do 12 minus 6.5 to get this 5.5 over there. Okay? Oh, and this was actually plus. Sorry about that. Make sure you switch that to a plus. Okay. Next problem. So let's do it again. Okay, now this one has a problem. You see that 9 out front? What we have to do is, if you have a number out front, we're going to pull it out of the first two terms. So if we divide 18, we get 2. Okay? And then leave your space, right? So that means in our vertex form, we're going to have a 9 out front too. That's your A, right? All right, so divide the 2 in half. That's going to become 1. Okay? And then if we square 1, 1 squared is 1. So we're adding 1. But now watch out, because we're not actually adding 1. I can't put minus 1 over here now next to this 4, because we didn't add 1. Look at what we added. There's a 9 outside. We added 9 times 1. Okay? So we actually added 9 onto this equation. So I have to subtract 9 off of here. So it's 4 minus 9, and that's a negative 5. Okay? Let's try the next one. All right. So this one doesn't have anything out front that we need to worry about. So let's just isolate the first two. Okay. So it starts with x squared minus. So you also need a minus. If we divide 7.5, let's do this one with decimals. Decimals can be easier with this. So I get 3.5. 7 divided in half is 3.5. And then if I square 3.5, I added 12.25. So I have to both add and subtract it, right? So 3 minus 12.25 gives me negative 9.25. Okay, so I actually need a negative there. And there is our equation. Okay? All right, let's try this one. So this one does have a number out front. So again, we're going to need to pull that out of the first two terms only, right? All right, so this is kind of strange. So we're doing 16. If you divide 16 by 1/2, right, when you're doing divide by a fraction, you flip and multiply. So it's actually the same as 16 times 2. Okay, so that's going to give us a 32. Don't forget your x. Okay, so now we have a 1/2 out front. X plus 16, because divide the 32 in half. Okay, now what do we add? 16 squared. So how much is 16 squared? I'll type that in the calculator. 16 squared is 256. But remember, we didn't actually add 256. Whenever you take something out of the front, you have to multiply it back in, because that's what you actually added. So we actually added 256 times 1/2. So that's 128. So we now have to subtract off 128. Okay? So now negative 7 minus 128 is going to leave us with a negative 135, and there is our equation. All right, last one. So this one has a negative 5 out front. So when we pull out a negative 5, remember, pulling out a negative is going to switch signs, okay? So when we do 20 divided by negative 5, that's a negative 4. Okay, that means we're going to have negative 5 and then x minus 2 squared, have that 4, and then if we square that negative 2, it's going to become a positive 4. And then remember, what did we actually add? We actually added negative 5 times 4, so we actually added negative 20 into here. So the opposite of negative 20 is a positive 20 to zero it out, right? Negative 1 plus 20 is 19. Okay. And that is the final problem. So make sure now that you download the homework, print it out, or just do it on a piece of notebook paper. Take a photo of both your in-class assignment that you filled out with me here on the video and your homework and email them to me. Make sure you get those in. Thank you very much.